Back in fourth grade, our class embarked on an adventurous field trip to a rural zoo, nestled in the outskirts nearly an hour away from our school. It was one of those typical cloudy days with sporadic raindrops gently tapping on the windows of our yellow school bus. This zoo wasn't one of those vast, impressive ones with lions and tigers. Instead, it catered to smaller animals that were native to the region. The main attraction was this large, slightly eerie building that housed stuffed animals displayed in various scenes, alongside other educational exhibits. To a bunch of fourth graders, it was an exciting, yet somewhat eerie place. I've always been somewhat distant, content in my own world. On this trip, I found myself drifting away from the main group. While wandering around the dimly lit hallways, I spotted the stuffed animals, now frozen in time, but at that moment, they seemed almost alive behind the glass cases. That's when I noticed someone lurking behind a pile of chairs. Initially, I thought it was just one of those funny adults, part of the zoo staff trying to play a prank on unsuspecting kids. He stepped out from his hiding spot, and I thought he was just being playful, probably going to ask me where the rest of the class was. But the man's demeanor was different. There was something off-putting about his approach. He asked me where the group was. Honestly, I had no idea. Without giving it a second thought, he grabbed my hand, saying he'd help me find them. It all seemed so innocent, and my 8-year-old self-trusted adults blindly. We walked together towards the exit door, which led to the back section of the building. I could see a few dumpsters, some benches, and beyond them, the woods. As we moved closer to the door, his grip tightened on my hand, and suddenly, his demeanor changed. His behavior grew aggressive, and his intentions became alarmingly unclear. A sudden knot twisted in my stomach. It was a gut-wrenching feeling, like I'd eaten something bad. It was fear, raw and consuming, a fear so potent I could almost taste it. He started pulling me towards the woods, and panic started to take over. But then, piercing through the silence, a woman's scream echoed from somewhere behind the fence, distant yet urgent. It was one of our teachers, and it felt like a beacon of hope. The man abruptly released my hand and bolted into the woods. Seconds later, several teachers rushed through the exit door, finding me visibly shaken and bewildered. They scolded me for wandering off alone and praised me for handling the situation calmly. Their voices were a mix of worry and relief, but mostly concern. They called my parents, and the field trip was cut short. The zoo's staff called the authorities, but the incident was shrouded in confusion. As we boarded the buses to head back home, I couldn't shake off the chill that ran down my spine. My gaze lingered on the man, hiding in the woods behind a tree branch, watching us leave. It was as if his presence had etched itself into my memory, a haunting image that stayed with me for a long time. Even after reaching the safety of my home, I couldn't shake off the unnerving feeling. I might have been too shocked to react then, but as time passed, the gravity of that moment settled in, leaving me with the understanding that things could have been much worse. And I couldn't help but feel thankful for the vigilance of that teacher who might have saved me from an unforeseen danger.
Back in high school, I took this class about animals and weird stuff. I can't recall its name exactly. Anyway, the teacher, Miss Grace, organized a field trip during my senior year. This happened about 3 or 4 weeks into the school year. The class was pretty popular. Around 25 of us joined in. On the day of the trip, we met up in the class with Miss Grace and then headed out to the zoo. I remember grabbing a seat at the back of the bus. I knew most people in the class, but there was this one guy sitting across from me that I didn't recognize. We arrived at the zoo after a 15-minute bus ride. I didn't pay much attention during the trip, just buried my head in my phone. As we got off the bus and went inside the zoo, there weren't many people around. Our teacher told us to wander around and explore a bit on our own. I went off by myself to check out the animals. I ended up in this corner of the zoo that was pretty deserted. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw that guy from the bus. He looked at me and then gestured for me to follow him. I asked if he was from our class, and he kind of said yes, mentioning something about taking the class online. But then he started leading me off the main path into the woods. I didn't feel right about it, But then he mentioned having a gun and threatened me, so I didn't argue. We walked through the woods, and it was really thick. There wasn't even a proper path. He told me to keep going, but I didn't have a clue where we were headed. Suddenly, I heard noises from somewhere deeper in the woods. It felt like someone else was there with us, but I couldn't see anybody. Something clicked in my head, and I just bolted. I ran back towards the main path as fast as I could, not stopping until I met a classmate. I told them what had happened, and they alerted the others. We called the police, but by the time they showed up, the guy and whoever else was with him had vanished. Later on, we found out he wasn't even a student at our school, and he didn't have a gun after all. It was all a big scare tactic. But I couldn't figure out why he picked me, and it left me feeling spooked and unsettled for quite a while.
In my 8th grade year, the highlight of the school calendar was our much-anticipated field trip to Washington, D.C. The prospect of an excursion with my friends was enough to spark excitement throughout the class, and the moment we stepped off the bus in the nation's capital, we were filled with a sense of adventure and discovery. Amid all the preparations and excitement, our class of roughly 100 students was divided into 3 separate groups, with each group further divided into clusters that matched our hotel roommates. This arrangement would ensure that we explored different attractions throughout Washington, D.C., including monuments, parks, museums, and local eateries. After a long weekend of visiting educational sites, our teachers had a special treat for us: a colonial ghost tour. The tour was a twilight walking adventure through some of America's most historically significant sites, winding past village cemeteries and old townhomes. I've always been uneasy about anything related to ghosts, but I reassured myself that nothing supernatural would occur during this tour. The guide reiterated this point, assuring us that it was more about the history and storytelling. As we wandered from colonial home to cemetery plot to another colonial home, I became engrossed in the historical narratives our guides shared. They recounted stories about homeowners and their lives in these preserved properties. I wasn't much of a photographer during the tour, but some of my friends took snapshots, hoping to capture the elusive ghostly orbs that some believed could be seen in such photos. My friend Jessica, who was my roommate during the trip, was not among the avid photographers. She occasionally snapped a photograph but preferred to listen to the stories and soak in the history. As our group approached a small 2-story house with an eerie blue hue to its windows, my curiosity was piqued. The guide began recounting the house's history, which added to the eerie atmosphere. It had once belonged to a man and his beloved wife. The couple was overjoyed when they learned they were expecting a child. Tragically, the wife died shortly after giving birth to a baby girl. The man was consumed by grief and grew to resent his homely daughter. He isolated her within the house, continually berating her for her appearance and finding her a suitor. Listening to this tragic tale, I felt a profound sadness for the girl who endured such suffering in that house. Her only reprieve seemed to be the quiet hours she spent upstairs, using her skilled hands for sewing and weaving. Moved by the story, Jessica took a photograph of the house and we continued on our tour. However, it was the next house that led to a chilling discovery. As Jessica reviewed the photographs on her digital camera's screen, a glimmer at the second-floor window on the right caught her eye. We both stared at the photo, zooming in to examine the scene more closely. To our astonishment, 3 figures were visible, peering out from the window. On the far right stood the spectral outline of a woman, her presence undeniable. A taller man stood behind her, partially to the side. Strangely, a third figure appeared to be a woman, but her features were less distinct. Her body was visible, but her skin was not as translucent as the other figures. It was an eerie and inexplicable sight that sent shivers down our spines. I couldn't help but wonder about the identity of these apparitions. While the first 2 figures aligned with the tale of the father and daughter in the previous house, this mysterious third figure remained an enigma. My curiosity got the better of me, and I raised my hand to ask our guide if there had been another person living with the family in the house we had just visited. The guide seemed taken aback by my question, but offered an answer. Yes, during their time there, they had a black female servant living with them. This revelation left us in stunned silence. The third figure in the photograph remained an unexplainable presence, adding an unsettling layer of mystery to the already eerie tour. As we continued through the colonial streets, the ghostly encounter remained etched in our minds, casting an enigmatic shadow over the remainder of our trip to Washington, D.C.
It was a few years back during my sophomore year in high school when this strange incident occurred. Our art class organized a field trip to the city's most renowned art museum. Being part of an advanced painting class, I didn't consider myself a great painter, but I enjoyed the subject. The field trip promised to be an all-day affair, starting early in the morning. We embarked on a bus ride that took roughly 20 minutes to reach the museum. Upon arrival at around 8:30 a.m., the entire class had a lengthy guided tour, which, though informative, felt a tad lengthy. We had lunch in the museum's cafeteria, and after that, we were granted an hour or so to explore the museum on our own before gathering to head back to school. During the lunch break, I noticed a few classmates deciding to opt for food from a nearby restaurant instead of the museum's cafeteria. I ventured in the opposite direction, scouting a couple of blocks until I stumbled upon a small eatery that seemed appealing. After a quick snack, I stepped outside, only to notice a stranger lingering nearby. Deciding it was best to return to the museum, I started walking back, and within moments, I noticed the stranger was following me at a distance. We were the only two on the street, except for a few passers-by, yet he kept a consistent 10-foot distance. Eventually, I made it back into the museum, and to my relief, he didn't follow me inside. The museum exploration continued, and as the time to depart approached, we were shepherded back onto the bus. However, upon returning to our school, an eerie sense of unease clouded my mind. Through the bus window, I saw the same stranger driving past the school's parking lot in a car. He didn't make eye contact, but his presence sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't fathom why this person, a complete stranger, seemed to follow me. School ended for the day, and in the mad rush to leave, I tried to blend in with the throngs of students. I threw on a sweatshirt, pulled the hood over my head, and hurriedly made my way to the bus. With a palpable sense of anxiety, I scanned my surroundings, fearing the stranger might trace our bus home. Fortunately, the journey remained uneventful, and I didn't spot him again. Reflecting on the day's events, I realized I should have shared the unsettling experience with a teacher or someone in authority. Regrettably, I kept it to myself, choosing to dismiss it as an odd occurrence. Despite the lingering sense of discomfort, I was immensely relieved that nothing untoward happened after that day.
During my senior year of high school, my forensics teacher, Mr. Stevenson, managed to persuade the school to organize a field trip to an abandoned building located deep within the woods. Though he may have initially suggested that we'd only be studying the exterior of the building, the reality was quite different. This mysterious site had a notorious history, having been the scene of a significant crime, and Mr. Stevenson's plan was to explore it more thoroughly. The location was already eerie, nestled in the heart of the forest, with an overgrown, nearly invisible road leading to it. At the time, our class was studying the topic of drugs and their impact on crime scenes, and Mr. Stevenson intended to use this location as an educational tool for us. It was an unusual choice for a school trip, considering the building's history as a former drug den. Upon our arrival, the unsettling aura of the building quickly became apparent. It was much more intimidating up close than I had imagined. The surroundings were surreal, with dense forests in every direction, and the overgrown road that led to the building was barely recognizable due to the grass that had overtaken it. Nevertheless, Mr. Stevenson led us inside with an air of familiarity, as if he had been there numerous times before, and he shared a wealth of knowledge about the building's history. It seemed that the original purpose of the building had always been shrouded in mystery, and construction on the upper levels remained incomplete, rendering it a prime location for drug deals and illegal activities. Our exploration felt like a surreal school field trip, delving deep into the heart of a former drug den. Mr. Stevenson's attitude was surprisingly lax during the trip. He didn't seem concerned as a few students ventured off to explore on their own, or perhaps he was simply indifferent. Feeling a sense of adventure, my friend Gianna, whom I affectionately referred to as G, and I decided to go off on our own as well. After all, there were around 8 floors in the building, and it appeared that the top floors were left unfinished. We felt confident that we would explore the upper levels and eventually reunite with the group or return to the bus. We began our ascent, climbing one flight of stairs after another. The middle floors revealed less debris and graffiti, but as we ascended further, the damage became more evident. We reached the second highest floor, and it became clear that the floors were constructed of weak and decaying wood. The top floor, however, appeared inaccessible, as the stairs had been completely stripped and broken. Determined to reach the uppermost level, we looked for an alternative route. As we navigated the rotting wood, we noticed a hole in the ceiling above. That's when our adventure took a chilling turn. Gianna pointed out the hole, indicating that she saw something. A bizarre ticking noise resonated from above, similar to the sound someone might make to call a pet. We looked up, and an arm emerged from the hole. It was just an arm with a long black sleeve, but no other details were visible. The individual lay flat beside the hole in the floor, and the arm beckoned us upwards. Our initial curiosity soon turned to apprehension. We called out to the person, asking how to reach the top floor, but they didn't respond. Instead, they persisted in making the ticking noise, urging us to join them. The atmosphere grew eerie and unsettling, and Gianna and I decided it was time to retreat. As we made our way back to the stairs, a loud crash echoed from behind us. We turned to see a man on the far side of the room, gazing at the wall. What struck us was his unusual appearance. He didn't fit the profile of typical urban explorers. His presence felt more menacing and unstable, sending a chill down our spines. We fled the room, racing down the stairs as quickly as we could. However, as we descended, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being pursued. I looked up several times during our descent, and there he was, peering down at us from the top. Each time, he seemed closer, and I realized he was chasing us. We finally reached the bottom floor, but I kept glancing up to check if he was still there. The man had vanished, and we could breathe a sigh of relief. However, we were now far from the group. As we continued, we heard Mr. Stevenson's voice nearby. I chuckled, grateful to have made it back safely, but Gianna's unease lingered. We found Mr. Stevenson, who asked us where we had been, and we told him the truth about our eerie encounter with the man. While he scolded us for our recklessness, he also advised us to leave the building immediately. The other students who had wandered off had returned, and when we reached the bus, Mr. Stevenson conducted a head count multiple times. Despite the harrowing experience, the trip wasn't a failure for the rest of the students. They learned valuable insights about the building and its dark history. However, for Gianna and me, it became one of the most horrifying experiences we ever went through, leaving an indelible mark on our high school memories. During my college years, I enthusiastically enrolled in various art courses. These classes frequently featured field trips, often to art museums or, on occasion, more intricate art-related destinations. One of these excursions in particular took place during an art appreciation course and involved a weekend visit to a small town renowned for its artistic culture. Accompanied by a fellow classmate I'll refer to as Alex, we made arrangements to reserve a hotel room and set off on our journey. Our aim was to explore the town's artistic offerings and photograph designated art pieces to satisfy the requirements of the trip. It was meant to be an independent endeavor without a set group schedule, allowing us to explore the artworks at our own pace and leisure. As we embarked on our weekend adventure, we soon recognized that the town's surroundings were rather unsettling. Our destination appeared to be veiled in an air of desolation and uncertainty, but we remained optimistic. convinced that the art we would encounter would compensate for any initial unease. The first hint of trepidation came upon checking into our motel, an antiquated and dilapidated establishment that seemed frozen in time. However, it was late, and no alternatives presented themselves, so we resigned ourselves to staying in the questionable lodgings. The inside of the motel room was equally disheartening. It bore the wear and tear of countless guests over the years, leaving behind an aura of shabbiness. Although we hesitated upon entry, there was no turning back at that point, and we decided to spend the 2 scheduled nights there, opting to focus on the art rather than the accommodations. Anticipating a long day of art appreciation ahead, we promptly retired for the night. I, unfortunately, found myself roused from sleep at an hour too early for comfort by the incessant ringing of the room phone. Confusion washed over me, for the darkness beyond the window suggested that it was still nighttime. Grasping the receiver, I answered the call in hushed tones, hoping not to disturb Alex. To my surprise, the voice on the other end remained silent. I repeated my greeting, gradually elevating my volume, but still, there was no reply, only the steady rhythm of slow breathing. Inexplicably, the conversation seemed one-sided. A sudden knock at our room's door snapped me to attention. The perplexing aspect was that the sound also emanated through the phone line. I comprehended that someone was standing outside our room, and my unease deepened. As I continued to listen, the phone line abruptly went dead, plunging me into a disconcerting silence. Startled and confused, I shared the strange occurrence with Alex, who, too, found it peculiar. We considered confronting the motel's front desk about the incident in the morning and decided to return to sleep. Attempting to dismiss the incident, I closed my eyes and made an attempt to fall back into slumber. It wasn't long, however, before I found myself once again roused from sleep, only to be met by an unsettling darkness that enshrouded the room. My mind typically played tricks on me in pitch-black settings, conjuring imaginary shapes that danced in the shadows. This time, my vision seemed to summon a dark figure, though I initially dismissed it as one of my mind's benign creations. Recalling previous instances of such visual illusions, I regarded the phenomenon with mild annoyance rather than alarm. I continued to lie still, attempting to coax myself back to sleep. Nevertheless, with each moment that passed, the figure within the room appeared to draw nearer. My imagination, a fickle and unpredictable companion, usually conjured inanimate objects, but this figure defied my expectations. Its presence grew more distinct with each fluttering of my eyelids, growing bold enough to lean over my bed. I decided to dispel the illusion, extending my arm toward the shadowy intruder in an effort to pass my hand through the imaginary figure. However, my hand collided with an unexpected resistance, sending a jolt of panic coursing through me. Startled and perplexed, I inhaled sharply, causing the phantom figure to pivot around and swing the room's door open. Reacting instinctively to my shock, I released a piercing scream, raising the alarm to wake Alex, who stirred in surprise. The mysterious intruder bolted through the door and into the hallway beyond, swiftly vanishing from sight. In our state of heightened fear and confusion, we bolted the door securely and barricaded it to ensure no further intrusion. Wide-eyed and gripped by terror, we remained vigilant throughout the night. At the break of dawn, the two of us decided to cut our trip short and exit the unsettling motel. We never entertained the thought of confiding in the front desk staff about our harrowing experience. In the safety of daylight, we drove away from the motel, ending our getaway prematurely and immediately contacting the local authorities. Later investigations revealed that, after the motel's shift transition, the incoming staff member had not reported for duty, leaving the front desk unattended. Seizing this opportunity, an unknown intruder gained access to the premises, making off with the personal information of multiple guests, including room numbers and a master set of room keys. The lack of security cameras in the antiquated motel and the perpetrator's successful evasion of identification compounded our distress. The breach of our personal security and privacy left an indelible impression on both Alex and me, fueling our ongoing trepidation and unease. The unsettling thought that this unknown assailant possessed our personal information continues to cast a shadow over our memories of that weekend trip. The incident serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities that lurk in even the most unexpected and obscure corners of the world. Back in high school, I enrolled in a fascinating course that delved into mysteries and mythology, or something along those lines. I can't quite recall the specific name of the class, but it revolved around real-life enigmas and eerie occurrences that sparked my interest. My friend Ben, a fellow enthusiast of the inexplicable, joined me in this intriguing journey. Our teacher, an aficionado of all things mysterious, decided to take us on a field trip to an abandoned village with an enigmatic past nestled in the desolate woods nearby. This dilapidated village, constructed in the early 1900s, bore an aura of abandonment, as if frozen in time since its hurried desertion. The bus ride to this forgotten hamlet took us down a sketchy, overgrown road that sliced through dense forests. Upon arrival, we stepped onto a cracked road overgrown with wild grass, the eerie silence interrupted only by the creaking of the bus doors. The buildings, tall and archaic, stood like sentinels, with boarded-up windows and crumbling brick facades. Our teacher, leading our group of 20 students, aimed to apply the skills we learned in class, attempting to piece together the puzzle of this forsaken village's history. As we explored, we noticed peculiarities, holes in the walls acting as makeshift entrances and disturbing holes in the ground appearing to lead into the buried basements of some structures. Amidst this chilling backdrop, one towering structure stood apart, a building that intrigued me more than the rest. While our teacher guided the group towards the village church, Ben and I decided to break away from the pack, driven by our curiosity to uncover hidden secrets. As we sauntered towards the tallest building, we stumbled upon a hole near the back entrance, seemingly dug to access the building's sealed-off door. A ladder peeked from the hole, extending an invitation into the depths below. Instinct and curiosity battled within us, and we agreed to explore further. I descended first, my phone flashlight guiding our way in the dim, dusty space. Empty beer bottles, graffiti-clad walls, and scattered wooden planks adorned the lower level. A wooden stairway beckoned us upwards, leading to unexplored darkness. Each step creaked under our weight, sending shivers down our spines. The upper floor felt claustrophobic, with narrow passageways branching into tiny rooms, enveloped in an impenetrable darkness that defied the daylight. A sense of foreboding crept upon us, urging us to retreat. But then, a sudden noise, like a heavy object hitting the concrete floor, jolted our senses. Frozen in place, we silently shared a glance, our instincts tethering us to the opening of a nearby room. Flickering our phone lights into the room, we were met with an unsettling sight, a sight that sent us scrambling back down the stairs and out through the rusty ladder. Gasping for breath, we rejoined our group, opting to remain silent to evade trouble. When questioned by a curious classmate, we reluctantly revealed our clandestine exploration. We confessed to sneaking into one of the buildings, uncovering 3 shadowy figures standing in an unnerving formation, silently observing us as if expecting our intrusion. Continuing the tour, we kept a wary eye on the tall building from a distance. Before leaving, we witnessed an unexpected sight, a face peering from an unboarded window on an upper level, chilling our spines with its silent gaze. Ben suggested the hair-raising possibility of spirits haunting the abandoned town, a theory that sent shivers down my spine. The eerie calmness with which those 3 figures observed us haunted my thoughts, their silent stare etched in my memory. We decided not to disclose our unnerving encounter to our teacher, fearing repercussions. The mystery of the village lingered in our minds, leaving us to ponder its secrets. The eerie incident left me with a lasting fascination, and despite the fear, a curious desire brewed within me to revisit the village, not to validate Ben's theory, but to unravel the enigma that still lingered within those desolate walls.
Once, in my younger days around the age of 12, There was this peculiar field trip arranged to watch a theatrical performance. It wasn't something I was eagerly awaiting, but the prospect of escaping school for a few hours enticed me. My best friend and I signed up together. The field trip lasted around 3 hours, and there was a limited number of slots available. About 40 kids were allowed, along with 2 supervising teachers. We embarked on this escapade during the early hours of the day, roughly commencing during second period. The destination was a majestic old-style theater in the heart of the city, a grand venue that reeked of history and elegance. Our seating section was remarkably close to the stage, with even an upper deck offering fantastic views. However, the eerie encounter commenced not long after settling into our seats. About 15 minutes prior to the show's commencement, amidst the bustling crowd, I noticed a man whose gaze seemed locked onto me. His stare was intense and unsettling, prompting a shiver down my spine. Disturbed, I informed my friend, and as we glanced back, the man's unsettling gaze remained fixed on us, exuding an unnerving aura. We decided it was best to avert our eyes and focused on the upcoming performance. The play kicked off, and surprisingly, it was captivating. I found myself engrossed in it more than anticipated. My friend shared my sentiments. However, when the initial intermission arrived, signaling a break for refreshments or a bathroom visit, I seized the opportunity to use the restroom. As I ventured out of the auditorium towards the bathroom down the hall, upon my return, an unnerving sight greeted me. The peculiar, disconcerting man loomed at the theater doorway, blocking my path back to my seat. I hesitated, feeling uneasy. Not wanting to confront him directly, I took a detour back into the bathroom. Hoping he'd eventually move, I waited within the confines of the restroom. Yet, to my horror, he followed me inside. I sought refuge in a stall, but my heart skipped a beat when he attempted to pry it open. Panicked, I raised my voice, causing the man to aggressively pound on the door. As I contemplated my next move, someone else entered, and the man swiftly occupied the adjacent stall. Bolting out of the bathroom, I raced back to my seat, recounting the unsettling incident to my friend. Throughout the remainder of the play, we avoided glancing towards his direction. But at one point, curiosity overcame me, and when I did dare to look, he had vanished, disappeared without a trace from the theater. This chilling episode left me deeply unsettled. The peculiar man's inexplicable presence and alarming behavior haunted me. To this day, I shudder at the memory, never knowing what his intentions truly were or if he was merely a specter that had drifted into our reality for that brief, eerie encounter.
When I was younger, every summer meant a 6-hour trip to my uncle's lakeside cabin. It was a family tradition, all my mom's sons gathering for a short vacation. Hanging out with my cousins was cool, but the long drive was a drag. 6 hours solo in the car felt like forever, especially on the deserted forest highway. This story happened during one of those drives. Instead of my usual daytime trip, I had to drive through the night this time. Just off a tough work shift, I had no choice but to navigate the dark forest roads. The highway was pretty quiet, even during the day. I noticed my gas tank was empty, which was annoying. My brother had told me he'd filled up the car, but that wasn't the case. Desperately searching for an exit, I spotted a handmade sign advertising a gas station. Despite its rough appearance, I took the exit hoping to fill up. The road changed from a smooth surface to dirt, with trees closing in. My headlights revealed an abandoned gas station on the right. Broken windows, missing pumps, and a falling roof showed it hadn't been used for ages. No chance of getting gas there. I called AAA and gave them my best guess of where I was in the forest. In the pitch black, my eyes got used to the darkness, and I couldn't help but stare at the deserted station. Then came a whisper. Someone called out, asking me to come closer. Terrified, I saw a figure near the building, barely visible. My heart raced as the figure moved toward me. He offered a container of gas for free if I followed him into the empty building. I said no, my gut telling me it was dangerous. The man's face, which had looked friendly, turned cold and emotionless. A tense moment passed before the sound of gravel signaled the arrival of an approaching AAA truck. The stranger bolted into the forest, followed by several others who emerged from hiding. The AAA responder, looking puzzled, arrived just in time to see the weird sight of people fleeing. With my car refueled, I left before the authorities arrived. Days later, I heard that nobody ever found those strangers. The encounter still haunts me. What were their intentions? How many more were involved? I shiver at the thought that I was stranded on an empty forest road, far from help. The stranger's presence, their motives a mystery, sends a chill down my spine. The AAA truck showing up saved me from what could have been a strange and scary situation. This incident remains vivid. A night when darkness concealed more than just the unknown forest. It hid something eerie and unnerving.
This tale unfolded during the hazy summer months of yesteryear. It was one of those July evenings when the air hung heavy with humidity, and the sweltering heat seemed to linger even after the sun had long dipped beneath the horizon. My impromptu decision to embark on a solo road trip stemmed from a need to savor those last few precious days before returning to the regimented college life waiting for me come August. I've always found solace in exploring, and a couple of nearby destinations remained uncharted on my bucket list. Hence, the idea of seizing the day for a spontaneous adventure took hold, and I found myself packing light and hitting the road. The plan was simple yet promising. Rise at the break of dawn, traverse several destinations during the day, and start the journey back home around 9 p.m. This arrangement ensured that I could bask in the thrill of exploration without the added expense of lodging. As anticipated, the journey there was smooth and relatively uneventful. However, it was the return trip that plunged me into a maze of fear and uncertainty. Sometime around 10 p.m., I set off, a map app predicting a 4.5-hour drive back home. But as midnight approached, fatigue began to claw at me with vicious intent. The exhaustion was so palpable that it felt like driving further was courting disaster. A decision needed to be made, and the prospect of an hour's nap at the next rest stop appeared to be the only feasible option. That's when I spotted a rest stop, lights flickering in the night, painting surreal shadows against the darkness. However, as I pulled in, the eerie silence enveloped me like a thick fog. The absence of other vehicles at such an hour was unsettling. If it weren't for the dim lights, I would have sworn the place was abandoned. The sheer desolation, juxtaposed with the lighted windows, seemed oddly incongruous. Nevertheless, I brushed aside the feeling of unease and leaned my seat back, setting an alarm to rouse me in an hour's time. But as the minutes ticked away, slumber eluded me. A sense of foreboding lingered, and against my instincts, I ventured out into the rest stop for a bathroom break. The emptiness of the place amplified the sound of my footsteps, an odd symphony in the dead of night. As I pushed the bathroom door open, the fluorescent lights buzzed to life, casting an eerie glow over the otherwise deserted corridor. Inside the bathroom stall, I stood in silence, hoping for a quick return to my car and the resumption of my journey. Yet, within moments, my tranquility was shattered by the sound of hushed whispers. Panic bubbled within me. How could someone have entered without my noticing? The place had been desolate moments ago. Then, an inexplicable chill ran down my spine as the stall door swung open. Fear pierced the veil of fatigue as an eye peered through the narrow gap, a chilling gaze that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Before I could comprehend the situation, the stranger began slamming his head against the door, his screams echoing through the silent night. Adrenaline surged within me. Instinct took over, and I pushed against the stall door with all my might, forcing it open and sending the intruder staggering backward. Without a second thought, I sprinted for the exit, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of footsteps and heavy breathing followed, spurring me to dart towards my car. I fumbled for the keys, panic engulfing me as I scrambled into the driver's seat. The assailant collided with my car, a thud that resonated through the night, but I revved the engine and sped away, leaving the rest stop and its horrors behind. As As I distanced myself from that sinister place, the rush of fear and confusion enveloped me. I couldn't shake off the chilling image of that person standing in the rearview mirror, his haunting silhouette lingering in the recesses of my mind. The drive home was fraught with a whirlwind of emotions, a cocktail of relief, fear, and lingering apprehension. Each passing mile only added to the inexplicable sense of dread that now clung to me. I couldn't shake off the lingering questions. Who was that man? What compelled him to act in such a menacing manner? And why was I the target of his erratic behavior?
The excitement for our school's overnight camping trip had been palpable. Nestled within a remote part of the wilderness, the thrill of spending a night under the stars and sharing stories around the campfire lit our hearts with joy. But as dusk draped its shroud upon us, our cheerful spirits would soon give way to sheer terror. The bus ride back from a day of hiking and exploration had been filled with laughter and chatter. Our happiness, however, shattered into confusion and dread as a deafening bang echoed through the desolate road, jerking the bus to a sudden halt. Panic surged among us as the bus driver confirmed a blown tire, informing us that help would be delayed in arriving. The setting sun cast elongated shadows across the desolate road, and the symphony of nature's sounds took a haunting turn as the darkness enveloped our surroundings. Emerging from the ominous shadows, 4 obscure figures approached the bus. Fear gripped our hearts as the strangers boarded, demanding our phones and coercing us off the bus. It dawned upon us we were trapped in a perilous situation. Forcing us into the dense thicket, the strangers led us to an underground chamber, a damp, musty enclosure with makeshift walls and a low ceiling. The entrance, barricaded with heavy logs, sealed our fate. Hours crawled by in the oppressive darkness, the strangers plotting and whispering malevolently. Fear and uncertainty plagued our minds as we remained captive, clueless about their intentions. To our dismay, one of the strangers made a ransom call to the police, holding us hostage and demanding a hefty sum for our release. We huddled, praying fervently for a miraculous rescue before their threats materialized. Meanwhile, the authorities traced the call to a nearby cell tower, initiating a frantic search aided by sniffer dogs. Time ticked relentlessly as we grappled with the overwhelming fear of impending doom. As the hours wore on, the strangers' agitation heightened. Their erratic movements and brandishing of weapons intensified our terror, driving us to cling to each other, praying for salvation. Then, hope emerged in the form of distant voices. The police had found us. The desperate criminals attempted resistance, but their futile efforts crumbled before the armed officers storming the underground hideout. The arrests brought a surge of relief as tears cascaded down our faces, enveloped in embraces, overwhelmed by gratitude for our newfound freedom. It was a nightmare etched into our souls, a harrowing ordeal that none of us would ever forget. Yet, amid the trauma, we were grateful for the chance to emerge alive from the clutches of terror.
The recollection of that ominous field trip remains etched in my mind like a haunting tale whispered through time. The morning of the excursion felt colder than usual, a frigid nip in the air that sent shivers down my spine as I treaded the path from my house to school. Anticipation mingled with unease, for it was our inaugural visit to a historical site. We boarded the bus, a gleeful cacophony reigning within as laughter and chatter filled the air. The landscape outside transformed, transitioning into a rustic, less civilized setting. Trees encroached upon the winding, narrowing roads, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance and beckon. Arriving at the historical mansion, a facade of grandeur greeted us, tall white columns framing a sprawling, aged structure. Yet, stepping inside, an unsettling aura enveloped me. The air felt heavy, thick with a suffocating weight, while the flickering lights cast ominous shadows. As our guide narrated the mansion's history, a lineage marred by tragedies, untimely deaths, and unsolved murders, the sensation of unease heightened. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, eerie sounds that I struggled to decipher. Ignoring the foreboding chill creeping over me proved futile as we explored the mansion. Venturing to the upper floors intensified the disquiet. A palpable tension pervaded the atmosphere, each step amplifying the sense of being watched. Shadows darted in the periphery, teasing my perception, while an overwhelming feeling of suffocation encased me. A singular presence seemed to stalk my every move, invisible eyes fixated on my solitary figure as if the upper floor was solely mine to wander. A daunting sensation, one that rendered the air thick and suffocating. When finally ushered downstairs, relief washed over me upon stepping outside. However, the echo of a mournful, ghostly wail emanating from the mansion chilled me to the bone, a sinister farewell that lingered. Even as the bus drove us away, the disquietude refused to dissipate. A constant vigil, an unsettling feeling that something unseen shadowed my every move, haunted me. Back at school, I sought solace in familiarity, yet the mansion's memory lingered like a persistent specter. The feeling of being surveilled pervaded my thoughts, lingering even in the sanctuary of my room at night. Years later, curiosity and a desire to confront my unease led me back to the mansion. Yet, upon stepping within its walls, an immediate recognition washed over me. The heaviness, the weight of spirits, the unrelenting gaze of unseen eyes that seemed to follow me. A hasty retreat marked my departure, vowing never to return to that haunted abode, for the sensation of being watched persisted, a ghostly presence forever etched in the corridors of that eerie, haunted mansion.
In the depths of my memory, there's an unsettling recollection from my 7th grade year. A class field trip to Ripley's Aquarium of the Smokies near Gatlinburg, Tennessee, seemed like an ordinary day in the mountains, a seemingly dull destination for our science class. Mr. Russo, our relaxed science teacher, was our chaperone. He was more laid back than the other teachers, and his easygoing nature allowed my friend Aiden and me to discreetly escape the main group. It was Mr. Russo's lackadaisical approach that enabled us to slip away from the aquarium's bustling lobby. Impatient, we decided not to wait for the rest of the groups. The whole place was eerily vacant, devoid of any visitors but our classmates. As we ventured through the passageways leading to various observatories, we reveled in the emptiness, savouring the unobstructed views of the enormous fish tanks and exhibits. Each darkened room was bathed in a soft, ethereal blue glow, a result of the vibrant marina life. Amidst our light-hearted exploration, we couldn't resist making jokes about the fish, particularly the familiar characters from Finding Nemo, the clownfish and the forgetful Dory fish. But our casual escapade took a sinister turn when we heard a commanding voice piercing the silence. A man, dressed in cargo shorts and a green t-shirt, sternly inquired if we were part of the field trip. Though I was inclined to say no, Aiden replied affirmatively. The man, whom we assumed worked for the aquarium, ordered us to follow him immediately. Leaving the lobby behind, we found ourselves led through narrow, dimly lit hallways. We passed restrooms and exited signs overhead, eventually arriving at an exit door. Our guide explained that he had to take us around to the front of the aquarium for re-entry, and it made sense, or so we thought. Our misgivings were temporarily quelled as we followed him to his car. We climbed into the back seats without hesitation, convinced that this was a part of the aquarium's process. The man instructed us to fasten our seatbelts and smoothly pulled out of the rear parking lot. But when he veered left instead of right toward the front entrance, alarm bells rang in our heads. Both Aiden and I simultaneously inquired about his intentions. He remained ominously silent, his face an unreadable mask. Several seconds later, the door locks ominously clicked into place. The man brandished a menacing threat, a dire warning that if we made any sudden moves, he would kill us. To emphasize his threat, he retrieved a large knife from the glove box. We sat in paralyzed silence, our minds spinning with dread. We were just two terrified 7th graders, and he held our lives in his hands. The car sped uphill, further into the remote wooded wilderness. Panic gnawed at us as we considered the ominous detour. After what seemed like an eternity, the man pulled over, parked on the side of a desolate road, and exited the vehicle. It was a deserted area, a desolation with no signs of life, no houses, and no passing traffic. He ordered us to remain in the car, his knife held threateningly. With bated breath, we watched as he walked away, his intentions unclear. We exchanged whispers, attempting to formulate a plan for our escape. Though we couldn't speak openly, Aiden gradually slid over to my side of the car, where the door remained unlocked. As the man returned and opened my door, he made a dire threat, compelling me to step out. I conveyed a subtle message to Aiden, urging him to remain in the car. The man was unaware of our quiet communication. As I left the car, my heart pounded, and I found myself walking into the woods with the stranger, a knife concealed in his pocket. Fear pulsed through me as I heard Aiden sliding into the driver's seat. Moments later, I urged him to flee, and he sprinted downhill, leaving the man in the dust. The man attempted to pursue us on foot, but then, to our sheer terror, he hurled the knife in our direction. It missed me by mere inches, clanging against the ground. I didn't pause to retrieve it. I just continued running downhill, following Aiden. The man ceased his pursuit and soon disappeared. We miraculously made it back to the aquarium, sneaking back into our class unnoticed. Mr. Russo, engrossed in his relaxed teaching style, remained oblivious to our absence. As we grew older, the encounter haunted us, leaving us with lingering questions about the man's sinister intentions. Although we could only speculate, we chose to keep the incident to ourselves. What purpose would it serve to disclose the details of a traumatic experience that would likely remain unsolved? The incident remained an unsolved, chilling mystery, one we dared not revisit. To this day, we avoid revisiting those dark memories and pray that the shadow of that sinister man remains forever in the past. During my time in middle school, our curriculum embraced the notion that field trips held immense educational value. These excursions enriched our understanding of the world beyond the classroom, and it's a perspective I wholly endorse. One destination that remained a constant on our annual field trip agenda was the zoo. It didn't matter where we went for our other trips, the zoo visit was a perennial event. In my 7th grade year, as the school year drew to a close, our class embarked on the much-anticipated zoo adventure. Our zoo wasn't the grand, metropolitan Keene, but rather a smaller yet respectable establishment nestled amid a forested backdrop. Although not the most extravagant or extensive, it enjoyed a notable reputation within our community, attracting a modest but steady stream of visitors. Our 7th grade class comprised around 40 eager students. We moved as a single unit, following the predetermined path, but the cumbersome size of our group meant we couldn't explore every corner of the zoo in a single visit. My friend Carson and I, driven by youthful curiosity, devised a crafty plan to chart our own course. During the trip, we would casually break away from the group, affording ourselves an opportunity to delve into uncharted territories. Our heads were meticulously counted at the beginning of the trip, during lunch, and upon its conclusion, a system that provided ample leeway for our rogue escapades. Thus, we embarked on our self-guided adventures, straying from the group without detection. Within the first 10 minutes, we artfully detached from the main group, venturing into various sections of the zoo. At the close of this secret session, we seamlessly rejoined the group, ensuring our inconspicuous reintegration. It was as if we had never ventured off in the first place. This covert operation unfolded with impeccable precision, providing the confidence to undertake a repeat performance post-lunch. Despite our slower pace, we managed to explore areas we had yet to visit, including the intriguing bat enclosure, the zoo's star attraction. The bat enclosure, cleverly designed to mimic night and day, was a dim, cavernous realm. During daylight hours, only dim black lights illuminated the space, creating an atmosphere suitable for observing these fascinating creatures. A dimly lit cave entrance led into the heart of the exhibit. As Carson and I explored the enclosure, I couldn't help but feel the eerie ambiance of the exhibit. Despite being in the midst of a bustling zoo, it was uncannily dark, with only a few other visitors sharing our space. The bats hung from above, their nocturnal presence accentuating the mystique of the moment. As we scrutinized the intriguing creatures, a sudden, forceful grip on my arm jolted me from my reverie. I spun around to find a zoo employee clad in his work uniform. Startled, I attempted to understand the reason for his intervention. He admonished us for touching the glass, an accusation unjustified as we had been cautious not to do so. With an air of authority, he instructed us to follow him. Obediently, we trailed him through dim, winding passages that seemed to stretch infinitely. The faint, eerie glow of an exit sign eventually signaled our escape. Our guide ushered us outside, into the light of day. The world outside consisted of dense woods, eerily quiet and remote. A lone car sat beside the building, its trunk yawning wide open. Our sense of unease escalated. Our confusion deepened as the man beckoned us to the vehicle, leaving us with no alternative. With mounting trepidation, we entered the car. He instructed us to strap in, then set off without explanation. Despite his unwarranted actions, we maintained hope that there was a logical explanation for his behavior. However, moments later, the car turned in the opposite direction of the zoo. Panic enveloped us as we realized that something was terribly amiss. The situation began to unravel, and the pieces of the puzzle did not fit. To make matters worse, our attempts to exit the vehicle proved futile. The car unlocked from the outside but sealed itself upon closure. As we continued on this perplexing journey, a growing sense of dread filled the air. We reached a desolate location, devoid of houses or signs of life. The man ordered us out of the vehicle and instructed us to follow him. Beneath the shadowy canopy of the woods, with a knife concealed in his pocket, the man led us deeper into isolation. I felt a shiver run down my spine, uncertain of the intentions that lurked behind this ominous escapade. I noticed Aiden edging toward my side of the car, where the door remained unlocked. He was preparing to escape. In a whispered exchange, I implored him to be ready to run when the time was right. Summoning all my courage, I suddenly yelled, "Run, Aiden!" The moment was upon us, and we bolted, leaving the man in our wake. He attempted to pursue us on foot, but the dense forest shielded our escape. He resorted to throwing the knife, narrowly missing his mark. We ran for an unknown duration until we could no longer hear our pursuer. Our legs ached, our hearts pounded, but we had left the danger behind. Eventually, we emerged from the forest, encountering a fence. It was a fence that held the promise of rejoining our group. In a desperate leap, we crossed over, returning to the safety of the zoo. Exhausted and breathless, we reunited with our classmates. Remarkably, we slipped back into the fold, our absence unnoticed by the others or our chaperone, Mr. Russo. Our secret escapade remained concealed. In the days that followed, the incident continued to plague our thoughts. A few days later, I received a text message from Carson. It contained a group photo of our entire class taken near the zoo's entrance, just before our departure. A message accompanied the image, bearing a bone-chilling directive. Look in the top left corner. I scrutinized the photograph intently, and there, in the top left corner, stood the man who had tried to abduct us. His presence in the photograph sent shockwaves through us, and we were forced to confront a nightmarish reality. It was irrefutably the same man, his face clearly visible, and his chilling gaze directly aimed at the camera. The implications of this discovery were haunting. The man in question was no ordinary employee, as we had initially assumed. The reality struck harder and deeper, a sinister presence concealed beneath the veneer of a uniform. Our decision to keep the incident hidden was a matter of self-preservation rather than selfishness. We understood that exposing the truth would likely result in reduced opportunities for future field trips. In the face of a traumatic experience, we chose to keep our ordeal a closely guarded secret, our hopes resting on the belief that this man would never cross paths with other unsuspecting children. During my formative years in elementary school, I had the privilege of residing near a pair of well-known state parks. The school often utilized these picturesque natural settings for field trips that aim to impart knowledge about plants, wildlife, and the wonders of the great outdoors. I fondly recall one such trip from my first or second grade days, etched indelibly in my memory. A school bus transported my entire class, roughly numbering between 50 and 60 children, to this serene haven. The abundance of kids certainly presented a challenge in maintaining order. Nevertheless, the trip commenced without incident, and our journey through nature's classroom began. As the day progressed, we reached the pivotal moment of lunchtime. Famished, we devoured our meals, eager for the subsequent playtime at the playground adjacent to the eating area. The playground mirrored those found at conventional elementary schools, complete with swings, slides, and jungle gyms. Not surprisingly, as soon as I completed my meal, I dashed to the playground with an insatiable desire to explore and play. Perched alone on a swing in the remote corner of the playground, I scanned the tranquil woods beyond, my curiosity piqued. The other kids were still in the process of savoring their meals, leaving me with an abundance of time on my hands. But alas, there were no playmates in sight, so I patiently swayed back and forth, observing the natural surroundings. As my gaze lingered among the trees, something unusual caught my eye. There, concealed partially behind a tree, was a man in his early 50s, covertly observing me. Upon my discovery, he playfully emerged from behind the tree, feigning amusement at my having caught him spying on me. In his hands, he held a camera, which he promptly began using to snap pictures of me. I quizzically inquired about his intentions, to which he spun a tale of being employed by a magazine company in dire need of fresh cover photos. Despite my young age, I was easily persuaded and fantasized about gracing the front cover of a magazine. The friendly conversation soon took a sinister turn as he delved into inquiries about my personal life. His questions extended beyond the innocent realm, venturing into dangerous territory. He sought to know my home address, my parents' occupations, their contact numbers, and even my social security number, a query to which I was utterly unequipped to respond. Nevertheless, my childish innocence compelled me to offer the limited information I possessed. Trusting his fabricated narrative, I could not perceive the malevolent undertones lurking beneath. At this juncture, the man divulged that he had forgotten something crucial in his car and requested my assistance in retrieving it. Naively, I assented to his request and followed him, hand in hand, away from the playground and deeper into the forest. With each step, the playground and the other children grew increasingly distant. The encompassing trees created a canopy of solitude, a stark contrast to the joyful atmosphere of the school excursion. As I queried the man about the location of his car, he replied with a hint of urgency, prompting us to continue onward. We ventured into the depths of the forest, my young heart pounding, and the unsettling sense that something was amiss began to take root. As we journeyed further, a parking lot materialized before us. The man directed me to a vehicle parked at the farthest edge of the lot. Opening the rear door, he gestured for me to enter the vehicle. Perplexed, I hesitated, my initial understanding shattered. I reminded him that we were merely fetching something from his car, but his tone darkened as he barked the same directive. My unease heightened as he slammed the car door shut behind me. I was now trapped within, and he swiftly circled the vehicle to the driver's seat. With a grim determination in his eyes, he accelerated away from the lot. Fear and confusion welled up within me, and my voice quivered as I asked him our destination. A chilling silence hung in the air, disrupted only by the ominous focus etched on his face. With growing dread, I repeated my question, but the man remained silent, his gaze fixed unwaveringly ahead. It was at this juncture that I attempted to exit the vehicle, only to discover that the child safety lock had been engaged. The futile struggle to open the door was a sobering reminder of my dire situation. My sense of impending danger intensified as the forest began to recede. We neared the park's exit, and tears welled up in my eyes. Frustration and panic welled within me, and a profound sense of powerlessness overcame me. Yet, just when despair seemed to eclipse all hope, salvation arrived in an unexpected form. A park ranger's vehicle pulled up behind us, its flashing lights illuminating our situation. I seized this opportunity and began to wildly gesticulate from the rear window, desperate to capture the ranger's attention. The man, too, noticed the park rangers and reacted swiftly. He yelled at me to lie down on the floor, brandishing a gun from beneath his seat. Frightened, I complied with his command, but the actions of this desperate stranger had already exposed the sinister nature of the situation. The park rangers approached, their presence transforming the bleak panorama. One of the officers, guided by my frantic signals, located me and offered comfort. As I narrated the events that had transpired, an immediate call for backup was issued. In the end, the man who had abducted me was arrested. I was not allowed to return home on the bus that day. Instead, my mother retrieved me from the park, her emotions oscillating between relief and fury. She embraced me tightly, simultaneously reprimanding and expressing gratitude for my safety. This harrowing incident continues to haunt me. I was saved from the clutches of a kidnapper due to a fortuitous confluence of events. If not for the timely intervention of those park rangers, my fate may have been drastically different. The memory serves as a chilling reminder of the dark corners that can lurk even in the most seemingly idyllic places. Back in my school days, I was part of the Herrera School District in Connecticut. During middle and high school, I lived in a district that had more money. They organized a lot of school trips. I was in the chorus, and every year we'd go on 1 or 2 optional trips together. One year, when I was in my second year of high school, we went to Woodloch Pines Resort in Pennsylvania. It was a long bus ride from Herrera, and I was with my friend, Landon. We planned to share a room there. The place seemed pretty quiet when we got there, and we thought it might be because it was November and quite cold. We had 3 days planned for the trip, and 4 adults watching us, but they weren't always around. We just had to let them know what we were up to. The first day was cool. Landon and I hung out with 2 girls we knew. We did some go-karting, climbed rocks, and spent time in the pool. After dinner, we went back to our room and hung out. Our room was on the ground floor, and there was a sliding door that looked out over a lake down the hill. We left the blinds open that night because the moon made a cool reflection on the lake. Little did we know, that was the start of something scary. We spent an hour in our beds talking and trying to get comfortable. Suddenly, Landon, who was closer to the door, yelled out in shock. I looked and saw a really tall, skinny, older woman with long gray hair outside our door. She was pressing her hands against the glass as if she was trying to see inside. She walked away, and when we checked, she was gone. We knew we hadn't imagined her. The next day, we didn't tell any adults, but talked to the 2 girls about what happened. When night came, we made sure to close the blinds and lock the back door. I fell asleep first, but I woke up to an unsettling silence. I sat up and noticed something blocking my view of Landon's bed. When I looked up, the tall woman was looming over me. She mentioned our back door had been unlocked, then walked away. I was scared stiff. I woke up Landon and told him what happened. We locked everything up again and decided to stay awake for the rest of the night. By 4 a.m., we went to the dining hall for breakfast. When we got back, we could see the old woman sitting in a neighboring room, staring at us. We ran to the front desk to report her to the staff. They found the woman and an older man sitting in the room. They seemed off, and the staff couldn't figure out what to do. Finally, the adults got involved, and the trip ended early. Landon and I were relieved to get away from that strange place. The whole experience left us feeling really uneasy.